Hello, greetings, like they say it in England. So today we had Bart Huby, who is a partner at LSP company, a huge financial company that entered sport analytics world. And it's going to be interesting discussion today to understand how the companies from financial world are moving to sports world, why are they doing that, and all of the details. So Bart, nice to have you.
Hi, Carol. Nice to be on your podcast.
Yeah, tell us about yourself, introduce yourself, your company, what you do.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So I'm an actuary, which is a finance professional. So for the last 35 years, I've been working primarily in the world of pensions and finance. As a firm, we now have over 1,000 people, primarily in the UK. And historically, almost all our work was in the fields of insurance, pensions, and investment. And so over the years, we've been a successful company. We've grown a lot over the last 20, 30 years. And we've developed the ability in that work to take on board large quantities of data, to analyze that data, and to produce a front end which enables our clients to understand readily the information we're providing them. So about 10 years ago, as a firm, we decided we had built that team of analysts, data analysts, in a way that we could use those skills in other areas. Partly because it's always a good idea to diversify, partly because some of our core business was becoming mature and we need to look to growth prospects for the future. So we've built data analytics businesses in three areas. Two of them are health and energy analytics. The third one, where I lead the business within LCP, is sport analytics. And so what we said was, well, we've got these skills. Sport is also, obviously, and football in particular, it is a game of interest to a huge number of people, and it's of a lot of interest generally. So what we thought is, can we actually build a bit of a business based around football? Now, we knew that within LCP, we got a lot of people who are very interested in football and quite knowledgeable about it, but no one in the firm actually had any major contacts within the football industry. So we knew that we wouldn't be able to just build a technology platform that worked for football clubs without knowing more about the football industry. So we searched around for a partner firm, and after a couple of full starts, we came across a firm called Analytics FC. They're a football consultancy, FC standing for football club, obviously, and they consist of people who are very knowledgeable about the football industry, about the use of data within football, people like recruitment, sporting director, scout roles. What they didn't have was the ability to build, to take on large quantities of data, analyze it, and build real-time systems. So they were looking for a partner to do that. And so we've had a joint venture alliance with Analytics FC now for, I think, 8 years. And it's been very positive. We've provided that technology skills. They've provided knowledge, both about what football clubs are looking for, but also they've got the contacts within the football industry so that they can market and sell the product that we've developed. So what were we going to do? And the product that we've built is the main product. We've done a number of different things, but the core product is something called Transferlable. It's a platform that's it's called a SaaS platform. So a platform that football clubs and agents can have access to. They can buy a license to use. And what it has on it is football players and data on them. And it's about 100,000 male football players. We also have a female football player platform version of it that's got about 20,000 players on it. And what we do is we buy in data. So there's a company called Y-Scout which codes up every game in 100 plus men's leagues, 30 plus women's leagues, and every incident that happens on the pitch in each of those games. They will provide us with a data feed that has an XY coordinate, where it took place, who was involved, and what the outcome was. So we get this raw data every week. It's about 1.5 million items of data every week that comes in. And then what we've built between LCP, my firm, and Analytics FC is a proprietary algorithm. And what that algorithm is aiming to do is to say, we know a player may have done so many passes or so many shots or so many tackles, but actually what's really important is how effective each of those shots, tackles, passes was. And so what we do is we've developed something called a goal difference model, where it says what is the effect of that action by a player on the likelihood of their team scoring the next goal.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at each of those events, you can then build a pattern for each player on the platform for each of those metrics. We've got about 40 different metrics for every player. And then you can say which of those metrics are important for a striker or for a defender or for a midfielder or for a goalkeeper. And then you can start ranking the players. And then we also allow for the fact that, if you're playing a stronger team, it's harder to perform well. So there's a whole host of factors that go into the algorithm. And then once we've got the output from sort of the algorithm has assessed how good the players are, the final challenge is to build a front end platform that users can log into, and then they can sort the players, they can filter down, they can search through the database to find players of any particular characteristic who are particularly good or particularly good value at any particular metric position. And you can build your own player profile metrics. So it's a very flexible system. So that's the core of what we've built with Transferlable. There's quite a lot of tweaks to it in various directions, but that's the core product that we've built.
Yeah, a huge system, interesting system. And within this system, you mentioned that you are using different parameters to rank the player. So basically, you're feeding your algorithm with a lot of data, and then somehow you're ranking the data, right? And that's your data analysts build those models. Is it correct? Those models.
They built the algorithm. That's
Yeah.
right, and we're constantly developing the algorithm. We'll have a user, a club may say. I think one of the ones we recently built in was because what we get in the data feed from Scout is it'll tell you if it's a pass, but it won't tell you what type of pass it is. It'll say the pass was played from here to here on the pitch. Now, one of the metrics that the club asked us about was we want central defenders who can play diagonal balls, long distance diagonal balls across to the fullback on the other wing. We want players who are good at doing that. So the data we had didn't have long diagonal passes in it, but we said, well, actually, we can build a metric within the system that says if the ball travels a certain distance from a certain part of the pitch to another part, that's a diagonal. And then you can rank players based on that particular metric. So what it's doing is assessing for each of these different types of activity how effective a player is. So if a player's constantly progressing the ball through effective diagonals that land at the feet of the winger they're passing them to, then that will make that player look very good in that particular metric.
So does it mean if I understood you correctly, the player ranking actually depends on their position, and you could not rank the defender with, let's say, with a forward, right? You could not compare them because the metrics and the parameters that taken into the ranking are different.
That's the way in which. So we have some standard player profiles. So we would say there are certain metrics which will make a good winger of a certain style or a good centre forward. But the user of the platform can actually say, I want my centre forward striker to have a certain skill set, which is different from the standard. So they can build that skill set, and then that will use the underlying metrics to rank all the players on that particular profile. So it's very flexible. It can, but as you say, you wouldn't say this player is better than that player. If one player is a centre back and another is a winger, you wouldn't want to compare them on the same metrics because they're not playing the same position. So you'll be comparing players with, but sometimes you can find a player who, you sometimes find defensive midfield players who can play centre back. And so what the platform does allow you to do is to sort of say, if this player, they may currently be playing defensive midfield, but you can actually say, well, how good do they look actually if they were to play a centre back profile? And I know, and sometimes it can show interesting possibilities for players to play in different positions to where they currently play.
I think your platform is where the scouts or coaches could sit for a whole day, like replacing YouTube or replacing an Instagram or some of these things. They could just stay there and play around for the whole day.
Yes, we do. When we get a new client, they often do that. I mean, they don't do it forever, but when they first get access to it, they often spend a lot of time looking at different things. It's got a lot of different potential uses, so people do get quite excited. It's a bit like Football Manager, but a bit more focused on the latest data and on particular needs of clubs.
Yes, interesting. I guess really good feature would be like in your platform is that add one tab and then like like Instagram or TikTok Reels where you will be adding the best highlights of the week's best goals and then there is no way someone will log out from your platform.
Yes, so if we integrated video with it, that's true.
Yeah.
That's one of our longer term projects, but it's quite hard to do.
So, right now, you do not currently provide video for the players.
No, the video will come, and that's partly because that's not within our contract with Y Scout,
Mm-hmm.
but also partly because technically it's actually not that straightforward to do. I mean, you could simply have a link to the Y Scout platform, but if you actually wanted to say, I want to look at particular actions or events, it's quite it's quite a lot of extra coding work to do.
Interesting. Right. So you've mentioned that right, different clubs have different demands, right? And I'm curious, you're working like between us, you've mentioned around how many? 35 clubs with 35 clubs?
Yeah, we've currently got about 35 clubs as
Yeah.
clients.
So do you see any patterns? What are the clubs are looking for? Or is there is some pattern that everyone looks for? Maybe everyone looks for a goal scorer. That's always like that. Or what patterns do you see over there between your clients?
Well, I mean, we don't. We're providing access to clubs,
Uh-huh.
so they use it. We don't know exactly what they're doing with it. I think one of the interesting things that you find is that the interest in and the use of the platform varies quite a lot. I mean, 35 clubs is it's nice having that. We like to have more as clients, and one of the things we find is that the recruitment analytic industry is still relatively. There's a lot of talk about it, a lot of interest in it, but actually it's still relatively unsophisticated. So there are still a lot of people who will look at what we call the raw data, the data that's just the number of passes or shots or whatever. Maybe XG. I mean, XG has become much more understood. Our model is effectively taking XG and then moving it all the way back. So XG is really just looking at shots that actually take place. Whereas there are lots of things that happen on the pitch which aren't shots, but still make a difference to the likelihood of the team scoring the next goal. So we're still taking XG all the way back. But a lot of people working within football think they're using data when they're only using relatively raw data. I think getting a real understanding of the value of deep analytics is still relatively rare. And so we tend to find that the people we're working with have a particularly good understanding of the way in which the data is being used. I mean, one example I sort of give is the two clubs in England who have absolutely outperformed over the last 7 or 8 years using data. Well, the two clubs who've absolutely outperformed have been Brentford and Brighton. They're historically relatively small clubs, but they've done incredibly well based on they've become embedded, solid Premier League clubs, even though historically they were quite small. And they've both done it because they have owners who fully understand the value of data. Both of their owners. Do you know much about Matthew Benham at Brentford and Tony Bloom at Brighton?
Yeah, I know about Tony Bloom. I know not much, but I know that he runs, I think, Football Radar. Yeah, so I know a
Yeah.
little bit.
So they're both the owners of those two clubs. Unusually, again, actually, they're both owned by most football clubs in the Premier League now are actually owned by overseas owners, either from the Middle East or from America. But both Brentford and Brighton are actually owned by local people who have been supporters of those clubs for a long time. But both of them have been very successful in actually using data in the betting industry, and then they've used that data to inform the way in which their clubs have recruited people. And what's interesting is that they've been so successful. They've had basically a top-down approach of saying, we're going to structure our club around not just data, but around really focused recruitment, looking at bringing in relatively unknown players, relatively young unknown players, and then many of them have become successful, and then they've been able to sell them on to bigger clubs to generate profits. But what's interesting to me is that those clubs have been so successful on the back of that, which implies that most other clubs aren't doing that very well, including many of the bigger clubs. I mean, obviously Manchester United are the one that's got the biggest reputation for having struggled with its recruitment over the last few years. But it's having a really focused approach to recruitment that makes a difference. And I think we find that with the use of data more generally, that it's a relatively small number of clubs who really understand what you can do with focused analytics as opposed to just the raw data.
Yeah, unfortunately, like the sports industry overall is a little bit behind in terms of understanding the value of technology.
Yeah,
Like if we compare it to other, and you know it better than me, I think.
yeah,
And as time goes on, I think that's gonna be changing a little bit.
I do think so. Yeah, I think it's changing reasonably quickly, but in a fairly chaotic way, I'd put it. I think you find that people move around between clubs in the football industry quite quickly. Again, having that sort of consistency of approach is a real challenge for clubs. I think recognition of the value of data and the need to use it intelligently is there, but actually
Hmm.
turning that into practice is still quite a challenge for a lot of clubs.
Yeah, true. And all right, so you're focusing mostly, on professional clubs and high-level players, but also you've mentioned that guys like Tony Bloom and those clubs are what the business model, they are also looking for young talents and they are raising them and selling them to the bigger clubs. So my question is here, how is your platform covering youth football, junior football, and what are plans over there? Do you plan to provide a lot of scouting data on junior leagues across all
Yeah,
of the world?
yeah, it's a good question because I mean, youth data is more challenging because obviously as a young player develops through from like 15, 16 up to about 20, they they're not their physicality is changing as well as their skill set. So you will find much more variability in the development of youth players
Mm-hmm.
compared to professional players who are over, say, the age of 21. So I think one has to recognise that using data for younger players is going to be less precise.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we've recently, I think 2 weeks ago, just launched a new version of Transferlab called Transferlab Emerge, which is looking at players under the age of 21 and is taking into account youth leagues rather than the main version of Transferlab is
Mm-hmm.
working only on full professional top ranked leagues, whereas we've now got this new version which is including youth leagues down to I think ages of 16, I think. So it'll be interesting to see how much value people can put on that data. It will be, you are really then looking at potential young talents that haven't been recognised as yet. And so the opportunity that it offers is huge in terms of finding unrecognised talent. But at the same time, it's harder, partly because those players will have played fewer games, partly because those games will be in junior leagues, and partly because the players themselves are developing. So it will be interesting to see how much value people find from that league. But I think it's certainly got some very interesting data in it.
Does it mean that you develop new algorithms in terms of player rankings that are, younger than just probably U19 and etc.?
Yeah, I mean it's not a different algorithm, but it's a different way of ranking players. So
Mm-hmm.
it's taking the younger players and comparing them against their peers.
Mm-hmm.
But again, as I said, some young players develop more quickly than others and develop their full physicality at an earlier age than others. So that sort of relative ranking is still going to be more subject to change over time.
Okay, and the next question, how do you track the accuracy of your ratings, and how do you improve the models itself? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Part of that is responsibility for that is with our partners at Analytics FC because
Mm-hmm.
they're the people who understand the football industry and the way in which players work. They do a lot of work understanding, looking at how the quality of players revealed on Transferlab compares against the real life progression of players.
Mm-hmm.
So we are regularly tweaking, I think is probably the right word, but adjusting the algorithm to reflect those metrics which seem to be more important. So there is a bit of a feedback mechanism of sort of saying, when you've looked at a player, when you've had a couple of seasons, which of these metrics, you build a player profile, and then which of the metrics in that player profile are actually proving in practice to be the most important, and then feeding that back into the system. So it's a constant sort of feedback loop going on, refining the system and improving it.
Okay, and we are heading towards the end, but I'm interested to hear the future plans for, Transferlab. What are the, vision? So
For
right now
Transferlab,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, that's a good question, because as you said, we think there's plenty more clubs that could use it than
Mm-hmm.
currently do. And so we're constantly, we've developed very recently. Originally, it was only in English. It's now, I think, there's a Spanish version, a Portuguese version, a
Mm-hmm.
Greek version. So the different language versions, we're looking to promote its use more widely. We are adding extra elements to it, so there's a physical strength and speed aspects rather than purely effectiveness of players, but also people want to know how athletic players are. So we're able to infer that from some of the performance aspects. So we're constantly developing it, and we're wanting to build a bigger client base. We're also looking at integrating it more fully within a sort of platform for clubs to manage their data from all sources more effectively.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of technological developments being worked on. Very interesting area, and as I said, I think it's still, and you said it's still early days in many ways for the effective use of data analytics within football. But I think the value is, particularly by American owners of clubs, they see the value and they're keen to promote it. So I think there's going to be a lot of developments in the next few years across the sports data analytics field.
And do you see focusing only on, the clubs, or do you look for other industries as well?
So we've got a number of player agents who have access to it. One of the
Mm-hmm.
things that the data in it has been used as well is to support football players in negotiating their contracts with
Mm-hmm.
clubs. So one of the biggest examples, I think 3 or 4 years ago, was Kevin De Bruyne when he negotiated his contract with
Mm-hmm.
Manchester City 3 years ago. That was done. Support for that was provided by our colleagues at Analytics SC using Transferlab
Uh-huh.
data. And they've done probably about a dozen similar pieces of support for players. So I think
Wow.
players using data to help demonstrate their ability to clubs is an interesting area.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's interesting, right? Yeah. And look, Bart, we had an interesting discussion,
Yeah.
but at the end of my pod, first of all, I'd love to have you more, and maybe we'll have another discussion, but I'm trying to have it in 30 minutes to not
Yeah.
overwhelm everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at the end of each podcast, I ask a blitz questions. So are you ready?
Go on. You haven't
Okay,
warned me.
so it's gonna be easy, but what is your favorite sport?
It has to be football, both to watch and to play. I'm actually quite a good cyclist and runner. I do duathlons, but football is my favourite.
You don't need to say football because you work in football.
No. I love playing football. I said I'm actually quite a good cyclist. I compete in duathlons, but I would prefer to be a better footballer. I still enjoy playing.
Okay, nice. Who is your favorite player?
Kenny Dalglish.
Kenny, I'm sorry.
Kenny Dalglish. He played for Liverpool about 30 years ago. He used to be
Okay,
Liverpool manager. You,
okay.
King Kenny. You must have heard of King Kenny.
I'm too young. I'm sorry. Even
Okay.
though I'm Liverpool fan, I haven't heard about him.
Uh, yeah, no,
All
it's got to
right.
be Kenny Dalglish, I'm afraid. But I'm a bit older than you.
A little bit. So the next question, what is the favorite part of your job?
It's explaining things, talking to people, building networks, trying to improve the way in which the data is understood and used. Also, the other area which we haven't really talked about is football governance and finance. So we're also developing a business in that area. And I Yeah, I just find talking to people about football and working about ways that we might be able to work together is the best part of the job.
Awesome. What is the best part of your job? I ask you, what is the worst part of your job?
The worst. Having too many things to do and just trying to work out which is the most important to do at any point in time. Feeling there are things I should be doing that I just don't have time for.
Yeah, that's true. That's what all of us feel. Okay, and the last one. What advice would you give to young people, to people who are trying to build their business or career in sports tech or sports overall?
Yeah. Getting out your comfort zone, keep pushing, you need to be realistic, but you also need to keep applying yourself because it's a tough industry. There's a lot of people who want to work in it. So you need to be realistic about what you can do, but also at the same time very positive about it.
Mm-hmm. All right, Bart, thank you so much. Tell us, where could our listeners follow your work and
So I'm on LinkedIn, so I regularly post on LinkedIn. We also have quite a lot of articles on our website at LCP. But personally, I put a lot of stuff on LinkedIn.
Awesome, Bart. It was great to have you. Interesting discussion. We might have some in a year to discuss
Yeah.
a little bit of your financial part of the business in terms of helping teams. For me, it's a great discussion because I learned a lot. I couldn't Google this much or ask ChatGPT, and it's great to speak and to meet people like you.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I've really enjoyed talking to you and answering your questions and learning about your business as well.
Thank
So
you.
thank you. Okay. Cheers, then.